And we are live. Hi, everyone. Today is the day before Thanksgiving. For those of you who live in the United States of America, I am so happy to be joining y'all today for Real Talk with Dr. Lulu, episode 9. I was trying to be sure, is it episode 9 or is it 10 already? And I guess it's 9. And if it's 10, then I stand corrected. But welcome to episode 9 of Real Talk with Dr. Lulu. So today we're going to be talking about a concept that I created that actually is possibly going to be one of my next TEDx talks. So it's also the post that I made today is titled Bias Begins at Home. How are y'all doing? Oh my goodness. Okay, so y'all know I stay low-key hyper, right? But today I want to begin by acknowledging the city of Atlanta, Georgia. So Atlanta, Georgia, y'all came out to show out on Thursday. I had an event on Thursday and I wouldn't say I made the mistake. I'm going to say I made the announcement that it was going to be red carpet. And I did not know that when you tell Atlanta, Georgia, red carpet, they take it seriously. So I arrive at the event and they literally just roll out the red carpet for me. Hey, Monique, roll out the red carpet still in its wrap, okay? It was still wrapped up in the brand new plastic. So I want to begin by saying, be careful what you dream of, be careful what you ask for, because you might even get it. A lot of people begin this, they think that they have fear of failure, but really it's usually fear of success. Like, what if it works? What if it messes around and works? So let's talk about that really quickly before we jump into our theme for the day, which is Bias Begins at Home. So for those of you who do not know, this time last week I was talking about, did I come live last week? I don't know. If I didn't, then that's fine. But this time last week was the day before my first ever Affirming Care ATL event. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Dr. Lulu. I'm a pediatrician by training, an LGBT plus advocate by calling, and a mom of a trans child by design at this point, because I can't think of another word. So I moved to Atlanta, Georgia last year, and I wanted to become a bridge between the LGBT plus community, which is my community, and the healthcare community, which is also my community. I wanted them to be able to come together in a space where they can have respect for each other, have a conversation that is moderated by me and all the things. So I had asked the universe for 50 attendees. I said, I'll be very happy if I get 50. And as at 5 p.m. on Thursday last week, I had 62 people that had registered. And I am just so excited because people were so encouraging. Everyone was so positive. They came in their Sunday best. They were not playing. The food was top notch. The chef did his best to recreate Nigerian jollof rice. It was good. We had puff puff. He had something with shrimp. I can't remember what that was. And then he did some kind of pepper soup, and he did his best. But everyone thought it was such a good experience because on the one hand, we had LGBT plus people, and on the other hand, we had the healthcare community. We had physicians, we had PAs, we had nurses, we had pharmacists. We had everyone really that you can think of. So it was a great success. It was a huge success. And as someone who suffers with chronic illness, aka fibromyalgia in my case, I have been literally down since the event. I'm better now. I'm feeling better. Since yesterday, I started feeling better. So I said, okay, today I'm going to go live and do my Real Talk with Dr. Lulu, which usually is at 12 noon. But we may have to shift that because my coach, Toby, also does his weekly follow-up visits or whatever calls with us at 12 noon. So this may have to change, but we'll see. I have been so encouraged because everyone is just like, this was such a good thing. You need to keep on doing what you're doing. And I've been encouraged by people who want to now sponsor. And like, it's just been really, really good. So today's topic is something that's been like burning on my mind for a while. I came up with the concept. I'm very proud of it. It's titled Bias Begins at Home. And I want to do a quick trial with y'all because I may very well do a webinar about it. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you see that I've been talking about my leadership series. I want to start talking about leadership more. So my leadership series is focused on identity-led leadership. And when you come into identity, there's no way you can discuss identity without discussing your childhood and the factors that affected your identity as a child. So the very first thing that I know, that I remember when I'm talking about bias begins at home. As a matter of fact, let me pull back a little bit and read. I want to read my LinkedIn post from today because it's short and straight to the point and really makes my point. So it has three vignettes in it. I'm going to read them to you because I want you all to kind of join me from the beginning. So it starts by saying, I start by saying, what if I told you that bias begins at home? And then I say, well, what would you say? Before you start overthinking it, read this, right? Okay, I'm reading it to you. So it starts by saying, a child reaches for a sparkly shirt, smiling, and his mom yells, put that back. That's not for you. Boys don't wear sparkly pink shirts. Okay. Another child speaks softly and someone snaps, speak up. Don't be shy. We won't tolerate that here. The opposite was the case for me, but we'll get there. Another one wants to dance, to sing, to move, and hears, act your age. Stop being dramatic. You're showing off. So these moments may seem small, but they are lessons. Lessons we absorb. Lessons that clip our wings and diminish our self-concepts. Lessons that lead to bias against oneself. Bias never starts at the workplace. A lot of people think that, bias is only something that happens when you're grown, which I've had to unlearn that, right? Just unlearn the fact that that children cannot be biased. Well, I mean, obviously they're not born biased, but they are taught bias. Children are taught bias. And because they are taught bias, they can also be taught the antidote, which I created. So we're going to talk about that in a second. It begins at home, at the dinner table, on the way to school drop-off, during homework, right? It begins with the rules we were taught to follow. It begins with the boxes we were told to fit into, the identities adults corrected us out of. Obviously, I don't want to talk about an LGBT plus person, but that's the obvious example. A child who was assigned male at birth who's acting effeminate, who's been corrected out of that. Okay? The not so funny jokes that shaped our judgments, the silences that shaped our fears, all of them happened at home. Okay? By the time we arrive at work, bias is no longer a choice. It becomes a lens through which we look at the whole world, right? And ourselves. So bias is learned very early. And since we're doing our leadership series, I mentioned here that any leader who doesn't understand their early learned lens will unconsciously repeat the same patterns when they're hiring, when they're making decisions, when there's conflict, and therefore affect their team's trust, right? So I wanted us to just kind of take a moment and, ponder on those three vignettes that I just gave you. Innocent children who, for no fault of theirs, are who they are, and the adults around them, want them to act a certain way. And so I ended by asking, what's one belief that you had to unlearn from childhood in order to lead differently? So I want to ask you all that question as well. What's one belief that you have had to unlearn For me, it was a fixed belief that my smile was too much, which is funny because today people tell me, "Oh, I love your smile," but I was almost yelled out of my smile. One day I was at home and I don't know what one of my siblings did, but I laughed out loud and I just kind of laughed really wide. And my dad told me to stop that laughter, that my laughter was. He kind of said something that I don't want to repeat. I've repeated it a few times and I don't like it. But that was my father, who I love so much even to today, right? But he said that thing to me, and for a while, and then my siblings laughed. They thought it was funny. For a while, I started rethinking smiling out loud or laughing out loud. And then when I was in high school, I talked a lot. I'm not going to lie to you. And people used to pick on me for talking too much. I got in trouble for talking too much. I think what I'm trying to say is that today I speak for a living and I get paid thousands of dollars for speaking. Imagine if I had listened to the naysayers from the beginning. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it didn't have any consequences on me, because as a queer person, y'all know my story. My aunt told me that I was going to go to hell. My dad said it was a phase. And when I was in medical school, I learned that being queer was a mental illness. I kept being pushed deeper and deeper into the closet. And I almost grew up hating myself, hating my queerness, hating my smile. And so the question I want to ask you today is, what trait of yours that you have naturally, that you were teased about by parents, by adults when you were a child, what were those things you've had to unlearn about yourself because people made you feel like they were not good? Type it in the comment section if you can remember anyone. And in the spirit of this talk, I actually wanted to discuss a couple more things. Let me see if I can find it. I may not be able to find it right now, right? I wanted to discuss a couple more topics. Okay, so this is me and ChatGPT right now. So we often think that bias lives out there. That bias is something that only happens in systems, only happens in politics, only happens at the workplace, right? Like I said at the beginning. But now we know that bias actually begins in the place that we're supposed to feel safest, where we're supposed to have the most sense of belonging. One of the things I talked about in my first TED Talk is that children who want to unlive themselves have truly been betrayed by those who were supposed to protect them. They've been betrayed by their teachers, by their parents, by their coaches, by their pastors, by their priests, by their peers. And they start telling themselves that they don't deserve to be alive. So I want you to reflect on your own earliest memory of being corrected for being different. Whether it's because you were tall, or you had a big, bright smile, or you were told that you were too much. Those things create bias. Those things make you feel biased. Those things make you feel like you're not enough, make you feel like you're not good enough. And then you start contorting yourself, morphing into someone that you're not, right? So let's link it to parenting and leadership, because as you know, I was a parent coach for a long time, and now I'm a leadership coach. And I help leaders create safe, affirming spaces for their multiply marginalized employees, or doctors create affirming practices for their multiply marginalized patients, right, and employees. So the way we were affirmed or silenced at home can now become the way that we affirm or silence others at work. I want to say that and just let y'all Ponder on that for a minute. The way we are affirmed or silenced at home becomes the way we affirm or silence others at work, in the community, in our families. You know, growing up, my mom, now I realize that she did her best. But when I was growing up, I had kind of a love-hate relationship with my mother. I was like, I just didn't really like her, even though I loved her. But now I realize that she didn't have what I needed from her to give to me, because maybe it was taken from her when she was a child, right? So maybe also you might be thinking about the same thing for yourself, about your own parents. Affirmation begins at home as well, and that's where we can begin to unlearn bias. So the three things that I came up with that can help you counteract bias, because I couldn't think of one thing. I came up with affirmation, compassion, and equity. Those three things is what it's going to take to begin to unlearn bias, begin to unlearn bias. So affirmation is seeing people as whole, seeing people as they say they are. It's not about acceptance, actually. Affirmation is when you say to yourself, I am woman, I am beautiful, I am so. It's saying to yourself that you are who you are. Affirmation is telling someone that this is who they are. You're not trying to correct them. You're not trying to change them. You're trying to reflect who they say they are back to them. Accepting it, because it's not up to you to accept, because they already are who they are. Wow. Think about that. Compassion for me is seeing someone, hearing someone, and asking them how you can help them, right? It's basically offering grace for the difference in yourself and in others. Self-compassion is the first sign of you wanting to help your own self, right? And then equity is balancing the skills. Equity is saying everybody needs what they need. I don't get to say what you need because it's different from mine, or I don't get to tell you you don't need it because it's different from mine. So starting from our hearts and our homes, we build a space where everybody gets what they need. Same thing at work, right? So what's one phrase or one rule from childhood that you've had to unlearn in order to lead? For me, the rule was to be quiet. To be quiet. And sometimes it's not what they say, it's how they say it. Be quiet was not gently told to me, was yelled at me. I was punished for that. And I realized that I cannot do my advocacy work if I'm trying to be quiet or trying to be silent, for instance, about like what's going on in today's world. I can't do my advocacy work. There's no space for silence when there's racism. There's no space for silence when there's discrimination. We have to speak up so that other people can see us as an example of what's possible. But I was told growing up to be silent a lot. I was told to be silent a lot. So besides the silence, because I do most of my work through speaking now, is also just me having a lot of internalized homophobia. I grew up being told that being queer was bad, so I had a lot of internalized homophobia to the point that it affected my sibling, one of my siblings, and my child. You know. So, if bias begins at home, then so can change, right? If bias begins at home, so can change. And if you can just think of the things you think about, because human beings are the only ones that can think about what they think about. So think about the things you think about, and ask yourself, is this fair? Because I think the opposite of bias to some extent is fairness, right? So we can build new hearts and new thoughts We can build new language. We can build new leadership of the people that are watching us, people that we lead. Leadership that teaches our kids, our teams, and our patients, and even ourselves how to belong. Because if you allow yourself to belong, then it's not going to be hard to allow someone else to belong. How do you belong? You don't leave any identity at the door. I talk about this every day, right? Leave no identity at the door because you want to be safe. Because, like somebody asked me yesterday, what happens if you bring all of your identity and you're trying to be authentic and then it's not received? Well, then you need to ask yourself a tough question. Is this indeed a safe place for me to stay? Is this a safe place for me to stay? You know, bias may be learned early, but so can affirmation, so can grace, so can empathy, so can compassion. Because the first classroom of equity is the house. Have you thought about that before? Like crazy. The first classroom where you learn about equity is at home. The first classroom where you learn about bias is at home. The first classroom where you learn about compassion is at home. So if you're not taught it at home, you can see how easily it can become a problem at work because it becomes a learned behavior. So this is really more for parents, especially leaders who are also parents, to start thinking about the way you're raising your kids. Start thinking about the way you're raising your kids. That's kind of all I had today. Not tomorrow, next week, I want us to talk about psychological safety because honestly, that to me is the next best thing. Once you become aware of your bias that is addressed towards yourself, you can also begin to undo that by creating psychological safety for yourself. So we're going to talk about that in the next coming days on my LinkedIn post, but also next week, Wednesday, we're going to talk about how can you create psychological safety for yourself and then for others. From the abundance of your own psychological safety for yourself, you can now share it with others. So my name is Dr. Lulu. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'm a pediatrician by training. I'm an LGBT plus advocate by calling, and I'm a mama beast by design. I help organizations create safe spaces for their multiply marginalized employees, and I help physicians specifically create safe practices for their multiply marginalized patients and employees. So if you have any questions, if you'd like to reach out to me, if you'd like me to come and do some training at your place of work, please send me a DM. I'm excited to meet you. All right, my name is Dr. Lulu, and I'll see you next Wednesday. All right, bye. Oh, actually, bye. I was going to give you my email. My email is coach@dr-lulu.com. My email is coach@dr-lulu.com. Okay, bye, y'all.